In this video, we're going to compare Whirlpool and Whole Foods. Whirlpool manufactures washing machines and consumer durables, and Whole Foods is a specialty type of grocery store. So these two firms are different, and the purpose of doing this is to show two different firms. In the full set of videos, we'll look at common size income statements, balance sheets, and at ratios and see what kind of differences we would expect to see and what kind of differences we do see between two firms that have very, very different business models. All right, we're using the calendar year 2012 through 2016 for both firms. Notice that Whirlpool's calendar year ends on December 31st. Whole Foods ends theirs on September 30th, so they operate on the 12 months ending in September as opposed to the calendar year, which we see with Whirlpool. All right, but it's still basically calendar year 2016 versus calendar year 2016. Whirlpool is larger in terms of sales, about $20 billion in 2016 versus only $15 billion for Whole Foods. Whirlpool has seen some slight growth from 18 billion to 20 billion. That's about 11% growth total over the span from 2012 to 2016. Whole Foods, on the other hand, has gone from about 12 billion to 16 billion. That's about a 25% change. So Whole Foods, we can tell, is growing faster. If we're doing horizontal analysis, the percent changes from year to year. All right, despite the fact that Whirlpool has higher revenue, they have a lot lower gross profit than Whole Foods. So there's an interesting first observation. The selling, general, and admin expenses at Whirlpool are a lot smaller than those at Whole Foods, though. And then when it comes down to the bottom line, Whole Foods net income is actually, or operating income is actually lower. When we get down to the net income, we also see a big difference here. They started out roughly in the same place, around $450 million of profit. But you didn't see a whole lot of change here with Whole Foods, but you see a doubling for Whirlpool. During the period we're looking at, Whirlpool was just coming out of the Great Recession. The consumer durables, selling washing machines, when the Great Recession kicked in, they stopped selling as many washing machines, and so they had to do whatever they had to do to make a profit, and so they're doing some recovery. Whole Foods, different dynamic. It's a firm that's growing, and it's also food related, so there's less economic sensitivity to it. If we pop down into the balance sheet, while the revenues here is about 20 billion as opposed to 15 billion, the total assets are about 19 billion for Whirlpool, but only 6 billion for Whole Foods. So while there's a $5 billion difference in revenue, the assets are closer to $13 billion difference. So a very large difference there, and we also see a very big change for Whirlpool in the period from 2012-13 to the period 2013 through 16. All right, and that's where the big change. Other non-current assets. If I wanted to know what that was, I would dig out the 10K and actually dig into it, but I suspect they bought somebody. I'm just guessing. I don't know, but that's usually what you would see with a change in non-current assets like that. If we look into the liabilities, increased from 11 to 14 billion. They have doubled over on this side from about 1.5 billion to 3 billion. If we compare those liabilities to the total assets, here it was about 1.5 billion to a little over 5 billion in assets, and now it's 3 billion in liabilities for 6 billion in assets for Whole Foods. Okay, so that's their financial leverage measure. If we look over here at our friends at Whirlpool, you see a similar change. Again, you saw that jump in 2014, 15, and 16, and that, generally speaking, is going to reflect, since it's other non-current liabilities and a jump in long-term debt. My guess is that you see that sort of thing happen in an acquisition. We look over here at Whole Foods. They had almost no long-term debt, and all of a sudden added $1 billion worth in 2016. If we go down here into the equity, interesting thing with Whole Foods, you see their share buyback. They started buying back shares, and notice they borrowed roughly $1 billion in long-term debt here, and bought back roughly $1 billion in treasury stock here. So that's a big change in the amount of leverage that they created. If we look at total liabilities to equity, it was at 1.5 billion to 3.8 billion in 2012. Now it's about evenly split with 3 billion and 3 billion. We also see stock buyback activity over here in Whirlpool. And so as we start going through the financial statements, we can see that there are some size differences in these two firms that make them not as easily comparable. And that's where we're going to start looking at things like common size income statements and common size balance sheets, which will put everything on either a percentage of revenue for the income statement or a percentage of assets for the balance sheet. And then we'll start comparing ratio values. The ratio values typically mix and match income statement and balance sheet numbers to give you the size of one number relative to the other number, and we'll have a better way of tracking information through there.